Donald Trump is a man known for controversy, but what he may be planning for America's debt could be his boldest move yet. The United States owes over $37 trillion, and the supposed solution to that problem? Crypto. At least that's according to Russia. Last month, Vladimir Putin's top advisor said this.
Америка прямо сейчас пытается поменять правила на рынке золота и криптовалют.
According to him, Washington is planning a secret financial reset, weaponizing crypto and gold to erase its debt and rebuild the global system in its favor. When you first hear this, it sounds like just another Russian smear campaign on America. But when you look closer, parts of what Moscow described actually line up with real proposals being discussed inside Trump's circle. His team has talked about creating a crypto strategic reserve, a government stockpile of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other major coins. And Trump himself? He's gone from calling crypto a scam to becoming one of the loudest champions, launching coins, promising innovation, and even hinting digital money could save America. Wild ideas, yes, but also from a man who breaks convention. This accusation isn't coming out of nowhere. It's landing just as the cracks in America's financial armor are starting to show. Confidence in the dollar is slipping. Rivals from Beijing to Delhi are building alternatives to the US-led system. And that pressure is forcing Washington to look for something new, a way to rewrite the rules before someone else does. So what exactly is Trump's ambitious plan to swap debt for crypto? Is it even real, and how would it actually work? If you'd only just heard of him this year, you'd think Donald Trump and crypto had been allies all along. He's launched his own coin, his wife's got one too, and his campaign even takes crypto donations. But that's all a recent conversion. Not long ago, Trump was calling Bitcoin a hoax, a made-up currency, and he wanted nothing to do with it. So what changed? Why would a man who dismissed crypto suddenly decide it could save America? Because something else changed first. The world has started to stop buying America's story. For almost the last century, the US could borrow endlessly because everyone trusted its money. The dollar was the world's reserve currency. Other countries needed dollars to trade, to invest, and to underpin their own currencies. And it was the financial cheat code unique to the United States. As long as the dollar ruled, the US could live beyond its means. But that advantage is beginning to slip away. Today, interest rates are exploding, doubts are growing, and borrowing now costs more than America's entire defense budget. That quiet assumption that the world will always need more dollars no longer feels unshakable. For the first time in generations, serious voices are asking, what would happen if the world moves on from the dollar? Because if it does, everything changes. The dollar isn't just money, it's how Washington projects influence, funds wars, and sets the rules of the global game. Take that away, and America's financial dominance, the engine behind its superpower status, begins to crack. And that's where Trump steps in. Because for all the noise around his sudden crypto hype, what he's really offering is something deeper, a way to rewrite the system before the system rewrites America. And it starts with a new plan quietly taking shape in Washington. Let's break down what this actually means. Usually to deal with rising debt, you need to either spend less or pay more of it off. But Trump's crypto plan isn't about higher taxes or painful spending cuts. He's hinting at something far more radical, bringing crypto into the heart of America's financial system. He now believes that crypto should be the key to tackling the one problem no politician dares to touch: America's enormous debt. At the center of this vision is something called the Genius Act.
This is really a big day. This afternoon, we take a giant step to cement American dominance of global finance and crypto technology.
But here's where things start to get murky. Most of what we heard about this act hasn't come from Washington at all, but from Moscow. Russian state media has been blasting out stories claiming Trump wants to back digital dollars with US debt. Whether that's policy or propaganda is hard to tell, but the fact that Russia's pushing it tells you something. They want the world to see America as desperate enough to gamble everything on crypto. Still, the idea itself isn't entirely fiction. It's built on a real debate in Washington, and about how crypto could one day be tied to US government bonds or government debt. And all of it revolves around these: stablecoins. Most cryptocurrencies are known for their unpredictability. They soar one day and plunge the next, and stablecoins were built to fix that problem. Instead of swinging wildly, they're tied to something solid, like the US dollar. The basic idea is that for every coin created, there's supposed to be a real dollar sitting in reserve. That's what makes them useful as actual money, not just a gamble. But here's where things get interesting. Under the Genius Act, those reserves wouldn't be cash in a bank. They'd be US Treasury bonds, the IOUs that keep America running. So every time a stablecoin is created, it isn't backed by cash, it's backed by American debt. If that sounds confusing, think of it this way. Imagine a gift card. On the surface, it's just plastic, but underneath it's tied to real money that the company already holds. Stablecoins work the same way, only instead of cash in the vault, the backing would be US government debt. In other words, every time a business, a bank, or even a foreign government uses stablecoins, they're effectively holding a piece of America's debt. If it worked, the dollar wouldn't just survive, it would dominate the digital age. But if it failed, it could bring down the entire system. This raises the real question: how would this actually function? Before we look more at this, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Incogni. If you use the internet as much as I do, then your personal data is already out there, scattered across personal search sites, online directories, and even commercial databases. Data brokers collect and sell it without your consent, and according to the annual breach report, this number is up 211% from 2023 to 2024. That means criminals, stalkers, or even employers can easily access sensitive details like your address, phone number, and family info. That's why Incogni is so valuable. With just one sign up, they legally contact hundreds of data brokers on your behalf and get your data removed. If it reappears, they go after it again. You can even use their custom removal feature. Just send them any link where your info is exposed and a privacy expert will take care of it. And unlike shady players in the space, Incogni is the first and only data removal service independently verified by Deloitte, so you know it actually works. It's 3 simple steps: create an account, authorize them to act, and let Incogni do the rest. Plus, it's risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Go to incogni.com/invisiblehand and use the code INVISIBLEHAND to get 60% off an annual plan. Now, let's get back to the video. In theory, the mechanics sound simple. Washington issues debt, the debt backs stablecoins, and then those stablecoins circulate as digital dollars, creating new demand for US treasuries. It's a clever trick, at least on paper, but the real problem begins with scale. America doesn't just owe billions, it owes tens of trillions. The entire stablecoin market today is worth about $300 billion, which is barely a drop compared to the ocean of debt the United States is drowning in. To make even a dent, stablecoins would have to grow on a scale the world has never seen before. And that's where the doubts start to creep in, because the real fear isn't just about boosting demand for US debt, it's about quietly devaluing it. In a digital system, Washington would have more control than ever before. Think about it, with a few keystrokes, it could flood the world with trillions of new stablecoins. On the surface, they'd look the same, but in reality, each coin would buy a little less. That's how you shrink a mountain of debt without ever having to pay it off, and it's the oldest trick in the book, inflating your way out of it. The funny thing is, America has actually done this before. In 1971, President Nixon shocked the world by suspending the dollar's convertibility into gold. Up until then, the deal had been simple. Any country holding US dollars could trade them back for gold at a fixed price. That promise was what made the dollar the bedrock of global finance. But behind the scenes, the math wasn't adding up. The US was spending heavily. Vietnam, the space race, new social programs, all paid for with freshly printed dollars. Soon, there were far more dollars circulating in the world than gold to buy them back. If Nixon had stuck to the old rules, America would have faced brutal spending cuts, or worse, bankruptcy. So instead, he did the unthinkable. He changed the rules overnight. Suddenly, the dollar was no longer backed by gold, and its value fell immediately. America's debts became cheaper, but everyone else holding US dollars found it was worth less than the day it had been before. It was a financial sleight of hand, hugely controversial abroad, but it brought Washington breathing room at home. Ever since, America's rivals have watched for the next moment the US might rewrite the rules to its own advantage. And that's exactly why Trump's crypto plans rings alarm bells around the globe. It looks like the same playbook, just updated for the digital age. And that's the paradox at the heart of Trump's vision. On paper, the Genius Act is about modernizing America's financial power, securing the dollar's place in a digital world. But in practice, it could do the opposite, shake the trust that the power depends upon. On the surface, Trump's plan carries a certain logic. Turn America's debt into the backbone of digital money, spread it worldwide, and the burden becomes easier to bear. But there's one problem. It plays with the only thing that treasuries can't live without: trust. And that's exactly where it starts to fall apart. Treasuries are trusted because they're simple. Investors know what they're buying: US debt backed by the promise of repayment. The moment Washington starts wrapping that promise inside cryptocurrencies, that simplicity disappears, and investors begin to wonder, is this really innovation, or just a trick to water down what's owed? Once that doubt creeps in, the whole equation shifts. When investors start second-guessing, they demand higher yields to compensate for the risk. Suddenly, the debt grows heavier, and the escape hatch Trump is pointing to starts looking like a trap. America's biggest creditors, Japan, China, Europe, all hold American treasuries because they've long been seen as the ultimate safe asset. If they begin to suspect Washington is tilting the rules, the reaction could be swift. And here's the key to it all. They don't have to threaten or negotiate. All they would need to do is sell, and America would be in trouble. For the US, that's the nightmare scenario. Selling treasuries doesn't just weaken the dollar, it triggers a chain reaction. Higher borrowing costs at home, pressure on America's banks, and a rush abroad to find options beyond the dollar. And once that trust breaks, whether on Wall Street, in Beijing, or in Tokyo, it's nearly impossible to piece back together. The dollar's power rests on confidence alone, and if the world believes Washington is using cryptocurrencies to quietly shrink its obligations, that confidence could collapse rapidly. But even if the markets don't panic, there's another kind of danger: losing control. As stated, for Trump's plan to work, stablecoins would have to expand beyond today's tiny footprint. And even if they did, there's no guarantee that they'd stay under US authority. Coin issuers could easily just move offshore, out of Washington's reach. If that happens, America's leverage disappears instantly. The US might still issue the debt, but someone else would now control how it moves, where it's traded, and who it benefits. It's the same problem the dollar already faces, only this time it would just unravel faster, and there would be no easy way to pull it back. Because the moment the digital assets slip outside American jurisdiction, they stop being a tool for American power and start becoming a liability. In that world, crypto doesn't make the US stronger, it just makes it more vulnerable to the system it created. This is the real danger, not just the economics, but the politics that come with it. Because the moment money becomes a piece of code, control becomes power. And that's exactly what every major player in the world is chasing right now. Russia isn't just warning about America's ambitions, it's using them to its advantage. By painting the US as desperate enough to rewrite the rules, Moscow pushes the story it's been telling for years, that the dollar's era is ending. Every headline, new sanctions list, every financial ripple becomes proof in that narrative. The more America uses its currency as a weapon, the more motivation others have to build systems that can't be controlled by Washington. And Russia certainly isn't alone in that effort. Across the world, America's rivals are moving to build a future that doesn't depend on the dollar at all. China, for one, isn't just talking, it's building. Its digital yuan already runs on a state-backed system built to circumvent the dollar entirely. It's exporting that model, quietly and methodically, to partners across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. A new financial web that settles payments without touching American banks or infrastructure. Bypassing the dollar is still not painless, but the more the US flirts with crypto, the easier it becomes for Beijing to argue that even America itself sees cracks in its own system. And for that, they're not entirely wrong. The global financial order that's existed since 1945 is starting to bend. For decades, the dollar was the language of trade, the measure of value, and the keeper of trust. But times are undeniably changing. Money once backed by gold and later by trust is now being rebuilt on code, and whoever rewrites that code shapes the next century. Whether Trump's crypto plan ever becomes reality remains uncertain, but the fact it's being discussed at all tells us something important. The battle for money has changed. Russia sees it as a weapon, China sees it as an opportunity, and America, it sees it as a lifeline. If cryptocurrencies really could help erase America's debt, it would rewrite not just finance, but the hierarchy of global power. That's why the idea is so dangerous, and so tempting, because the more the dollar is questioned, the harder Washington will fight to defend it, and the more rivals will push to build a world that doesn't need it. This isn't just an economic story, it's a story about control and who gets to define value, who sets the rules, and who breaks them when the system starts to crack. The debt is real, the technology is real, and the tension between them is where the next era of global finance will be decided. In the end, this isn't just about money, it's about power, and that fight has already begun.